Welcome to Reading Biblical Hebrew for Beginners, Part 1. We're going to look first at learning our Aleph, Beit, Gimels. This is the consonant letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Since this is the course introduction, I do want to say one thing. The course was titled Reading Biblical Hebrew for Beginners, and each part of that title has a purpose. We are going to focus in this class on reading the Hebrew text, not speaking. If you signed up for this class thinking that you would learn to speak Hebrew, I just want to let you know up front, this is not one we were going to speak Hebrew. For one, biblical Hebrew would be basically a dead language. People don't speak Hebrew the same today as they did in biblical times. Modern Hebrew, while there are many similarities, it uses the same alphabet, and you'll find much that's the same in the vocabulary. Modern Hebrew would be significantly different. People speak modern Hebrew today, but it is very different from what we're going to be looking at, which comes to the next part. We're going to be talking about biblical Hebrew. This is not a class on modern Hebrew, but one on biblical Hebrew. Then finally, I want to say this is for beginners. This course, as a community education class, is not designed for someone who has already had um, any kind of Hebrew background. It is designed for someone, whether it's a lay person who just wants to be able to begin looking at the original language, some for the Old Testament, or whether it's a pastor who has not been to seminary or didn't take Hebrew while they were in seminary, um, and they would like to be able to get another tool for their ministry belt and being able to understand what the Bible says. And then there's part one as a part of this. As a community education class, we only have 5 sessions. Those 5 3-hour sessions are not near enough time to be able to cover everything that you need to know to read biblical Hebrew. Um, my aim is to get us started, and we are planning to offer part 2, and we will just pick up where we leave off in this course with part 2. So if you like this course, if you are getting it and you want to go further beyond what we're going to be looking at in these 5 sessions, then please, I encourage you to sign up for Reading Biblical Hebrew for Beginners Part 2. We will begin that in October. Thank you. One other thing I need us to keep in mind concerning this as a course introduction, I'm giving this material in advance. I anticipate that everybody's getting a chance to look at this material before you come to class the first day. The reason I'm doing this is if we have to spend the entire first day of class, that first 3 hours, um, basically just learning the alphabet, that will severely limit how much progress that we can make overall in the course. If you spend the time and watch this video maybe multiple times and learn the alphabet and come to class that first day prepared, knowing the alphabet, we will be able to make much more progress um, and be able to get that much further in the 5 sessions that we have. So um, I'm also going to have a second video that I'm going to release before the class begins. And this other video will be on the vowels. It would even be more helpful if before you come to class, you're able to at least identify the vowels and know what sounds they make. We'll spend some time in class talking about that, But the more that you know about the alphabet, about the consonants, and about the vowels before you come to class, the more profitable this class will be for everyone. Thank you. Just a few things before we begin looking at the letters. First of all, the original Hebrew text to the Bible did not have vowels written out. It was all consonants. Even modern Hebrew is written with only the consonants. A native speaker just supplies the vowels as they read. The vowels were added later in an attempt to preserve the pronunciation. The current text, which we have, is based on what's called the Masoretic text, which was produced in the Middle Ages. The vowel pointing of the text does not merely preserve the pronunciation, but also an ancient understanding of what the text means. One thing about the Hebrew vowels is that they are usually written below the consonants, though not all of them. There's one that's actually written above, and there's some consonants that act as vowels, which we'll talk about when we come to the vowels. Anyway, I just want you to know, basically, for most of the time, you're going to see the vowels coming under the consonant. Some of the letters that you see have a dot in the middle. This dot is called a dagesh. Though they look exactly the same, there's actually two kinds of dageshes, dagesh lene and dagesh forte. As you may be able to tell from the Latin terminology, the dagesh forte is a strong dagesh, and the dagesh lene is soft. As we learn the alphabet, there are 6 letters we will see that have a dagesh. These are the only letters that can take a dagesh lene, but only by context will you know for sure what kind of dagesh it is. Any letter except for a guttural letter can have a dagesh forte. Guttural letters have special properties. We'll learn more about this later, but they cannot take a dagesh, and they prefer A-class vowels. We'll learn more about this later. One other thing we need to talk about is transliteration. Hebrew has its own alphabet, so we have a system to write out the sounds that are made by the Hebrew letters. This system is called transliteration. Transliteration is the equivalent sound from our alphabet made by the Hebrew letter. Transliteration is often done so that non-Hebrew readers can read a commentary on Scripture that talks about the Hebrew words without having to use the Hebrew characters. The first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Aleph. The transliteration for Aleph, because it's a silent letter, is just kind of an apostrophe. The sound that will come whenever you find an Aleph will actually be just the vowel sound. So, for example, the word Emmet, we think of that as a name, Emmet, but Emmet is the Hebrew word for truth. And so when you have the word Emmet, it would start with an Aleph, but you don't have the sound from the Aleph itself. You have the sound from the vowel that comes underneath of it. There may have, a native speaker may actually make a distinction between this and there's another silent letter. There may be a slight difference in pronunciation, but for an English speaker, we can't really tell the difference. So we just basically say that it's a silent letter. The next letter in the Hebrew alphabet is Beit. This one can occur with a dagesh or without a dagesh. It sounds like the letter B if it has the dagesh, letter B as in boy. And if it does not have a dagesh, it will sound like the letter V as in vest. So Beit, Beit, and if it doesn't have the dagesh, then you would pronounce it V, V. The next letter is Gimel. It makes a G sound. Again, this letter occurs with a dagesh in the middle or without one. Um, in ancient times, there may have been a they may have distinguished between the sounds with a doggish and without. Just like the Beit, we had Beit and B and V. But with the Gimel, we will not make any distinction between. It's just going to be a G sound, G, G. Um, uh, like I said, in ancient times they may have distinguished, but for our purposes, we will not distinguish between those sounds. The next letter is Dawlat. Um, this also occurs with a doggish or without a doggish. It is the sound of the letter D. Again, there was possibly in an ancient time a distinguishing difference between the Dalet with a doggish and without the doggish. We are just going to consider them the same sound. You can look at some textbooks on Hebrew, and the one without a doggish, they might say is like the hard TH sound, as in the. But for the most part, we're just going to consider this the D sound as in dog. Okay. The next letter is hey. This will have the H sound. Hey is a guttural letter, and as you remember, the hey has guttural letters have certain properties. One of these is that it will not ever take a doggish. The next letter is Vav. In a classical pronunciation, they might call that a wow. Um, but in a more modern translation pronunciation, they would call it Vav. The transliteration, some might put a W and others would put a V. The next letter is Zion. This is just transliterated as a Z sound, Z. This one's pretty self-explanatory. The next letter is Chet. Chet. This, as you see, the transliteration has an H with a little dot underneath of it. That little dot underneath of it means that we will pronounce this with that clearing sound in the back of your throat, like chet, chet. It is another guttural letter, and again, as is all the guttural letters, it will not take a doggish. The next letter is tit, tit. This will have a T sound, and particularly there's two letters that make a T sound. They're really very, very similar. If you are to make any kind of a distinction between the tate and the other T sound, this one you might make a dull T sound that's produced by placing the tongue against the palate, and it's a t, 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 t sound. Then comes Yod. Yod makes the Y sound, and I know the Germans, whenever they would transliterate Yod, it often came out as J, and so we get the name Jehovah, mostly out of a kind of an incorrect transliteration. It actually makes the Y sound, from which we get the name Yahweh. The next letter is Kaf. Kaf comes in three forms. We have with the doggish, without the doggish, and then also there's a final form. When Kaf occurs at the end of a word, it will have this final form that you see here. Okay, and then The transliteration is K, the K sound, k, k, k. And then it can occur with a dogish or without. We're not going to really distinguish a difference in the sound. There are some grammars that will tell you to distinguish it and make a similar sound to the chet, so that the cough without the dogish would make a ch sound. But we're not really going to make a distinction. We're just going to use the K sound for either one. Also, whenever you see the final form of cough, you'll usually see that it's going to have these two little dots underneath of it, unless it has a vowel. If it has a vowel, then it won't. But if it does not have a regular vowel, it will have those two little dots underneath of it. And then lamed. Lamed's pretty self-explanatory. With lamed, the sound, the transliteration is an L sound, l, l, l. Then we come to the Maem. Maem, it makes an M sound. And again, we have a final form for the letter Maem. If you have it in the middle of a word, you'll have this one over here on the left. And if you have it at the end of a word, you'll have it here on the right. That's what the Maem will look like. The next letter is Noon. It makes an N sound, as in nosy or no one. On the left over here, that's what you will find in the middle of a word or at the beginning. And over here on the right, that is the final form. When you find a noon at the end of a word, it will take that form. The next letter is Samic. Samic makes an S sound. There are a couple of letters that take the S sound. There's really no distinction here between the Samic sound and the other letter that makes an S sound. It's just an S. Then here's Ayan. Ayan is another silent letter, just like we had Aleph that was a silent letter. In your transliteration of it, notice the other, when we had the Aleph, it was an apostrophe that had the dot from the apostrophe at the top. Well, this transliteration for Ayan, we're going to use the other, an apostrophe that focuses the other direction. Ayan is a guttural letter. Again, it will not take a dogish. And again, whenever we see the word Ayan, or the letter Ayan, the sound will actually come from the vowel that is underneath. The next letter of the Hebrew alphabet is a pei. Pei can occur with a dogish or without a dogish. Whenever you have it with the dogish, it will make the P sound, p, p, p. And whenever you have it without the dogish, it will make the F sound or the PH sound. And then finally, you also have a final form. When you find pei at the end of a word, it will look like this that I've circled on the right. The next letter is tsadi. Tsadi. Notice whenever I pronounce that, it's not merely an S sound, but it makes the sound of like a TS together. Tss, tss. And it also occurs with a final form here on the right, or if it's at the beginning or the middle of the word, you'll find it here on the left. Also, there are some who would make a sound like a Z, Z. In fact, it is the letter that it begins the word Zion in the Hebrew text. Though we have a letter Zion, actually the word Zion, as in Mount Zion, begins with the tsadi, like we have right here. The next letter is kof. It makes a kind of a hard Q sound. K, k, k. It's very similar to the sound we have with the cough. In fact, I don't know that I would make any distinctions. You just need to know it makes the K sound. Next letter we come to is resh. The resh makes an R sound, and the resh is kind of unique. It sometimes acts like a guttural, and yet sometimes it does not take on the same properties as a guttural. We will come to understand that later when we get to a little bit later down the road. And we also have this unique letter. Actually, it's two different letters. We have sin and we have shin. The transliteration of the sin is an S sound, and the translation of the shin is an SH sound. The sin is over on the left here. Sin, and on the right you have shin. The only difference is where this little dot here is at the top. If it's on the left side, you have a sin, and if it's on the right side, you have a shin. For instance, whenever you hear the Bible story in Judges about the distinguishing between Sibboleth and Shibboleth, probably they began as one letter, and you had one dialect that would pronounce it like an S with like an S, and the other dialect would pronounce it as an SH. And over time, those changed to where they distinguished into two different letters. Sin makes an S sound, and shin makes the SH sound. And we're here at the last letter of the Hebrew Bible, the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. You have the Tav. The Tav with a dogish makes the T sound, and the Tav without the dogish. Some would say that it makes a soft TH sound, but we don't necessarily need to make any distinction here. We will just say it makes a T sound. Thank you for signing up for Reading Biblical Hebrew for Beginners, Part 1. I look forward to meeting you on August 28th at the Greenville campus of Kaskaskia College. We'll meet on Tuesdays from 3 to 6 p.m. for 5 weeks. I'll see you there. If you have any questions about this content, you may contact me at my email at jfile76@gmail.com. I'd be happy to talk by phone if you like, so just send me your number and I'll call you back. Thank you.